Welcome to Heart and Mind Talks, a podcast for female entrepreneurs navigating life and business. I'm Vanessa Ortali, award-winning speaker and coach. Join me and expert guests as we uncover how to make success simpler, more fun, and feel truly aligned to you. Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who could use a little extra love and inspiration. Let's go. You are going to love this episode with Brandi. Brandi started an entire makeup company from a women's shelter. She didn't even have the product. She drew up a product that she had in her head, pitched it to companies that ended up buying it. And now she has created an entire makeup company. She has donated over $500,000 to support women and women's shelters across North America. She wrote a book and has lots to share with you today. So enjoy this conversation with beautiful Brandi. Okay. Hey, Brandi. How
Hi.
are you? I'm so excited. We lost touch. What? I mean, oh my gosh. You know what? It would have been like 8, 9 years ago, at least.
That feels when I calculate time in my head,
Yeah.
feels like that's not logical because I'm 26 in my
Right.
head. So I'm like, oh, that can't be possible because we would have had to have been 16.
Yeah, right. I know.
That's not
So,
how.
yep, I get it. I know. It would have been 8 years ago because you and I met when I had first met my partner, who I'm with now, which we went to Vegas and it's a story, but we'll get into it. And yeah, and so that would have been like 8 years ago.
You know what, Kate? I also have to say this. I remember Vegas. I was so like conservative and in my shell for so long, and you were like, "Girl, we gotta go get you a different bathing
Yeah,
suit."
I
Remember
remember. Yeah. I was like, you are sexy as hell. You are getting a different bathing suit. Like, let's go.
I remember it so much. And it's so funny because that sticks with me now anytime. And it was like such a good push because anytime I'm like, girl, own your body. You work hard for it. You are good to it. It's good to you. Show it off. I always lean back into a bathing suit. So like now I have like little thong bathing suits and stuff. And that's like my risque thing. And that was
That
because
makes
of you and
that
I
makes me
love it.
happy. That makes me happy. Thank you. I'm so happy you told me that. Yeah. So we went to Vegas because you were going for a conference
Yes.
within the beauty industry, and you're like, "Hey, do you want to come?" And I came, and we had such a good time. Vegas is, you know what? I love Vegas. I obviously go often because my partner is a poker player. But I love that there's so many elements to Vegas, the food, the entertainment, but also the nature and the people because everyone's on vacation. I love the vibe.
The people watching in Vegas as well, because Vegas has such an eclectic group of people. You get everybody in Vegas. And so the people watching there is always the most entertaining part of the most entertaining city.
Yeah, yeah. Have you done any fun trips lately? I know you've always loved to travel.
Yeah, actually I was in Vegas in January this year.
There you go. For a conference?
Yeah, my husband was at for work and then I just joined along on that trip. And then also did Bali recently.
So nice.
Which I feel like, have you been to Bali?
No, but I want to go. I
I feel
would
like
love it.
Bali would be your vibe.
Yeah, yeah, I would love
Uh,
it. Yeah.
um, and then, yeah, shortly before that, we did Greece and Peru also this past year. And Peru is a place that I I would live there. It just the
Really?
an interesting fact is that Bali and Peru are like Lima and Bali or Indonesia and Peru are on the same like what would you call axis?
Access, yeah.
So they share the same energies. And you really do
Oh.
feel that. It's just this grounding energy in Peru and in Bali. It's
Cool. Did you do any ayahuasca when you were in Peru? Don't they have all the shamans and stuff in Peru?
I do. I
Yeah.
have done ayahuasca,
Okay.
but I didn't do it in Peru.
Can you tell me more about that experience? I haven't done it, but I'm very curious as to what that is like because I've heard so many good things and also people that are kind of scared to do it.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting? So I did it in my 20s, and I feel like in your 20s, like I didn't calculate any of the risks, and I was just like, yes, I need this awakening in my life. Whereas now when I think about going and doing it, because I have considered maybe going back and doing not ayahuasca again, but other psychedelics again, and I have this fear in me now that I didn't have before. Almost like, am I going to have a psychotic break and never be the same again if I do this again? Which I don't know what kind of logic there is to that. But yeah, the experience, ayahuasca is a long experience. It was like 8 hours long and it's not fun.
Did you puke and like poo the whole time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't like having those experiences around other people.
Right.
I find that I get really nervous and I think there must be something to explore in this. In fact, I know that there is. Like deep down, I don't really trust people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do on a surface level, but um, I yeah, so during the ayahuasca experience, all of that really came to the surface, and I was very paranoid through the experience.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
was a great experience, and it lasted so long. So you're just like, when is this going to end?
Mm-hmm.
But through that, there's also a lot of like enlightenment and recognizing, seeing a lot of things in my subconscious that I don't think I otherwise would have gotten to, or at least not gotten to that quickly, if it hadn't been for ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also did DMT5 a couple months after that. And DMT5 lasts all of like 12 minutes. And it was the most awakening experience. And I did end up doing it again. And I would do that. I would do that again for sure. I wouldn't do ayahuasca again.
Yeah, very cool. Because they
Yeah.
talk even about like MDMA therapy and all these things. And I don't think there's any right way to have a spiritual awakening, but I do believe in my experiences as well that they kind of, because I've tried MDMA and it kind of brings you to this point where you're like, oh, this, for me, it did unlock this. Oh my gosh, like this is who I am and this, and my connection to the world. And I remember everybody being so nice on MDMA and me thinking, this is my kind of world I want to live in. But yeah, it's really neat.
I've done MDMA as well, and I
Yeah.
have heard of MDMA therapy, and I've gone through some pretty severe depressions in my life too. And I really see how MDMA can kind of like remind you how good life can be. And
Hmm.
sometimes you need that kind of positive trigger to be able to start your healing journey as well. So I am an advocate for different modalities of whatever works for you. And obviously, I'm not a doctor, so like consult your practitioner or whatever other legal statements that need to be made. But I'm an advocate for doing whatever you need to do to be the best version of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's calling you, right? Like, don't feel pressured to do anything, but if it's calling you, look into it and see. But tell me more then about your spiritual journey. And I know we'll get into your journey of how you started your company as well, because I think from what I know, so much of what you've been through also enabled you to create your company. And you created a YouTube video or a YouTube channel about self-development. So tell me then a little bit more about your self-development journey and how you got to your beliefs and your values that you sit with today.
Yeah. And I also think that my beliefs and values are forever morphing and changing as I feel they should. I mean, there's certain things that I stand on that are the same now as they were forever. And but for the most part, I try to keep an open mind of how my values can shift and beliefs can shift, especially. I think it's important to always be challenging our beliefs as we get new information. So what's important to me is again like to forever be having an open mind and morphing through it, leaning into the fact that yeah, that things can change and that your opinions can change and that your narrative can change. I know we were talking about this a little bit pre-recording, but that all the facts can stay the same, but the way you choose to see them can shift, and your perspective of the world can shift through that, and your perspective of yourself can shift through that. And for me, that really has been maybe the most healing thing is being able to almost rewrite the past with the same facts, but a different perspective, knowing what I know now, and being able to reflect on that frequently. So once I realized that a narrative is no longer serving me, going back and really deep diving into that and saying, okay, what choices, what belief system did I have in that time? What choices was I making in that time that are no longer serving me today? And then taking a look at that perspective and saying, oh, you know what, that doesn't need to be true. And perhaps it wasn't even true back then. And by me choosing to hang on to this, it's actually harming me. And so I am choosing to be harmed through this situation. And so kind of reclaiming that power one choice at a time through this facts being the facts, but choosing a new narrative. And I think that's been the most healing thing for me. And sometimes, like we were just talking about the psychedelic aspect of it, sometimes you need different modalities. You need, or travel. You need to go see the world in a different way to be able to have different perspectives.
Yeah, I truly believe that because when we go through the experience the first time, we are different people. We go through it the best that we can at that time. But when we look back, we're looking back on it with completely different eyes, completely different perspectives. And so if we keep the same belief that we had at that time when we were completely different people, I think it keeps us stuck in that. And if we go back and think, well, I'm a different person now, what would I have done in that situation? Or how can I look at that situation differently? I think it really expands who we are and also heals our past and our trauma.
Totally. And it's so empowering also to acknowledge that, like, that you have that power instead of, waiting for someone's apology or waiting for some kind of, you know, change to happen within whatever it is that's harming you, that you really truly have the power within yourself to change that narrative, to reclaim, whatever you felt was taken from you in that moment. And it's actually incredibly empowering to recognize that you chose that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is because you're no longer a victim. This is your
Mhm.
life, and you're no longer a victim to your past self, other people. It really is so beautiful. And I know, so let's go into it. Let's start back at the beginning because others would say that you have been through traumatic experiences. So to watch you grow through this and, you know, to make lemonade from lemons is so inspiring. What you have created from the place that you were in particular, the place that you were in when you started your makeup company is just, it's so beautiful. So please share that story.
Yeah, so I started Evio while I was living in a safe house women's shelter. I was living in the Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Center, and I was living there because of domestic violence. And so while I was there, when I left my home, I left with my laptop,
Can we
$15.
go back to that? I want to go back to your domestic violence situation. How, tell me where you were and how you felt when you decided you had to leave.
Yeah, I remember this moment so, so clearly. Um, and I remember even what I was thinking, and we had just gotten into a fight. And I don't even remember what the fight was about. It was likely something so insignificant, which often they were, and then they would explode. And I ended up putting myself in the home office at our apartment that we shared. And I closed the door and I put a chair under the door. And I could hear that he was leaving our home. And so I put it there, even though I knew I was the only one home. And I started Googling for help. And I don't know what or why that particular time I thought, okay, I need to leave now. Um, I do know that about 6 months before that, a friend of mine had lost her life to domestic violence. And so that was really, really sitting with me, is that I felt that if I didn't do something, I knew how bad it could get. Um, and I was 21 at the time, and my friend that passed away was 19. And so these are early years where you don't really have the tools to navigate or really to even cope, um, or to even see the broader picture of what's going on. And so I remember just thinking about Maple and knowing that I needed help. So I just started Googling, and the first phone number that came up was the Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Center. So I called them, and they asked if I was safe. And I said, no. They asked if I needed help. I said, no. I just kept saying no. And they could recognize that I did need help. And so they gave me instructions on how to get to the shelter. And they tell you like you can't write the instructions down, you can't put it in your phone because often, and also in my case, my phone was being like mirrored onto his phone. So a safe house means that no one can know where it is. You can't tell your mom, your sister, you can't tell your friends, you can't tell anyone the address of where you're going for safety reasons. And so they told me how to get there. I collected stuff in a hurry. So I collected my laptop, a change of clothes, and I went to the shelter. And then you circle the block a couple of times to make sure no one's following you. They tell you that if someone's following you to call 911 because they don't want to jeopardize the location of other people that are there. And then I remember I went inside and then they register you. They ask you questions and take down some information about what you've been experiencing so that they can also have it on record for the police. Um, and then they showed me to my room, and it was a room with a single bed and then a bunk bed. And I was the only one in the room at the time. The first night, I was the only one in the room. The second night, then another woman moved in
Were you
and
petrified? When you walked in, were you so scared or did you feel relief?
felt nothing, just numb. I think at that point in my life, I was just extremely numb. Um,
How long had you been in this relationship until this point?
3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think something that's so important to state about just domestic violence in general is that these relationships aren't all bad. So like the highs were so high and the lows were so low. It's not that like it was 3 years of misery or anything like that. There was a lot of, I truly know that I am an entrepreneur now because of that relationship. There was this and that can both be true at the same time. There were so many great things that came from that relationship. It just so happened that this partner was fighting his own demons and that they came out in a violent way. And they came out in a controlling way. And they came out in, like domestic violence is so much more than just physical. So, it came out in isolation. It came out in a lot of different behaviors that are abusive. And so I think that, yeah, I think it's important to say that like the relationship was 3 years long, but a lot of those were happy times. And so yeah, so when I left and I was in the shelter, at that point I was just numb from the extreme roller coaster. And yeah, and I remember moving in, and then what I did while I was there is I was just distracting myself by watching YouTube, and I watched a lot of makeup tutorials. I was a makeup artist, and so I was doing makeup on weddings. I had an agent for weddings. I did a lot of like film and television. And so I was into makeup. And so that was kind of my outlet and my release. And so I was watching makeup tutorials and I got this ad for Photoshop in this Photoshop class. So I bootlegged a version of Photoshop and I Photoshopped an entire catalog of fake makeup and of this fake brand that I called Karma Face Cosmetics at the time. And then I shopped that fake catalog around to local boutiques and pre-sold them the product. And that's how I then got deposits to be able to get enough money to get back on my feet. I was able to start employing other women in the shelter. To date, we've been able to donate more than $500,000 back to 28 shelters across North America,
Wow.
funds as well as products. And yeah, and it was quite a journey. And then my ex ended up actually putting in with SIPO for a trademark application for Karma Face Cosmetics and suing me for infringement. So I had to then start all over again and again and again. So even after leaving, like the shelter wasn't kind of the end of the story. The abuse continued, through the legal system as well and continued to be really, really challenging. And then ultimately it led to his arrest a few months later.
Hmm. When did it stop? When he was arrested?
No. It went on for years after that. I ended up moving across the country and moving to Toronto just for a fresh start, and to also try to regulate my own nervous system and navigate my own, what's next, and start to build a new identity because my identity was definitely really wrapped up in who we were together. Um, and so, yeah, even after I moved to Toronto, it still continued for a while. Yeah.
Wow. When is the last time you had contact with this person?
Oh gosh, I don't even remember.
Yeah. Did you ever have, because he was obviously, like you said, going through his own things. Did he ever reach out and apologize, or did you ever have closure of that experience?
No, I mean, there's definitely times that he's apologized for
Hmm.
like different incidents. I think that that's, a big part of patterns of domestic violence is there's an outburst and then there's an apology and then there's what's called like love bombing and then there's, a high where maybe you go on a trip or something, a big moment in life that is so incredible and then the cycle starts all over again. Then there's, an outburst for something you looked at somebody wrong, someone looked at you wrong or something that just isn't even logical and it explodes and then the cycle starts all over again. So, I mean, he apologized many, many
Many
times.
times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you, at this point in your life, have fully healed from that experience, or do you still see some of it coming up through different triggers and things that happen in your life?
Definitely. I don't think that this might be a hot take. I don't think you ever fully heal from anything in life. And the reason why I say that is if you would have asked me 5 years ago, if I was healed, I'd be like, absolutely. My business is thriving. I am as happy as can be. I am living my life. I am at peace internally. But I was living in a vacuum. I was single. I was avoiding any triggers. And then, I got into a loving relationship and realized I didn't even know how to accept stable love. And there was a million things that were triggering to me and continue to be triggering to me. So I think that also while you're healing and those triggers change or different things change about you or your perspectives change or the narrative that you're saying changes, that also shifts your whole healing as well. So I don't say this in a bad way, but I don't think the healing ever ends. And I don't think it ever should because it's part of like that's life is like it's not where you're going, it's who you're becoming in the process. And so um the healing continues to evolve, but I don't think that it ever is complete, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm still very much, but not just from that in life, from so many things in life. We all have stories and we all have different experiences. That wasn't the only challenging thing that's happened in life. So, all of these different challenges and all of these different blessings in life end up in this big pot. And as you start layering different layers on, it just keeps evolving and changing. So,
Yeah, yeah. It's so true because things will happen and you go, oh, I didn't realize that trigger was still there. But I even feel like how I envision or the definition that I give healing has changed so much. I think for me, when in my past, I felt like healing was fixing and changing. And now I feel like healing is this acceptance and understanding and this evolution of perspective and choices, which you and I were talking about it and we'll dive into a little bit more. I want to go back though, because it's so cute how you spoke through this so fast, where you're like, no big deal. I just created a catalog and then I shopped it around to different boutiques. So this is where I think it's so beautiful that you took something that so many people think, oh, that's too big. And you did just make it kind of a no big deal. And so you created this catalog because you knew you wanted to create these products. You pitched them to different boutiques. What was that experience like when you pitched your product that actually didn't exist? And then you're selling a product that doesn't exist. Tell me a little bit more about that.
yeah, I mean, now it's so common because it's like what people would call like an MVP, or like, the minimal viable product of, you just make something and then see if the market has an appetite for it. I didn't have that kind of knowledge. Like I have my last year of formal education was grade 8, and I didn't know that what I was doing or that I was just getting more. I was just trying to eat. I was just trying to, put one foot in front of the other. So a lot of the times now I get questions about like what my strategy was or like how I knew to do those things. I'm like, I didn't. Like it really just is as simple as moving forward. And another thing that often comes up is that people are like amazed at that moment of the story and that I did this. Whereas when I look back at it, I'm like, that was the easiest part of the story. I had nothing to lose, everything to gain. I didn't have this sense of ego or this sense of identity that I felt I needed to uphold in any way, I literally had nothing to lose. And so it was easy enough for me to just, go and do the thing. Whereas now I actually find doing big, bold moves to be a lot more challenging. I have a family now. I have a sense of identity now. Like there's more to it. I guess we make things more complicated as we go along. And in that moment, it was just so simple. And I didn't tell people I was living in the shelter. I just pitched them. I think the first things I pitched them were lip glosses named after women who inspired me. And this was like 12 years ago. So at that time, that wasn't that common. Now you kind of see it everywhere. But at that time, one, there was no female founders in the beauty space. And a lot of these small boutiques that I was pitching to were female founded boutiques. And so they really understood the concept right away. And the concept was that it was cosmetics for women by women, and that we were donating $1 back from every product to the shelter. And so, but they didn't know that I was living in the shelter or what that whole process was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so neat. And then how, when you eventually changed the name to Evio, how did you come up with that and what does that mean?
Yeah, so I fortunately had an incredible woman who was once everything happened with Karma Face, she said, you really have some traction here. Don't give up, and I'm gonna join in with you. And her middle name was Evelyn, or is Evelyn. My middle name's Iona. So if you squish the two together, it's Evio, and that's where it came from. And her and I did try to make a partnership work for a short period of time, and it became very clear that we had different visions. And ultimately, the business was built on my story and experience, and so I continued to move forward and kept the name because I think that women should always continue to empower women, and she was a part of the journey and the experience. So, yeah.
Yeah, I also just love that so much of your story and your becomes your mission and becomes your why of why you're doing what you're doing. Do you still feel after all these years so connected to it and that you're still living your purpose every day?
That is a great question. Um, no.
Yeah.
And yes. Yeah, no and yes. And the reason why I say no is because my life has changed so much and who I have become has changed so much that I don't want to keep sitting in all of it. You know what I mean? As much as I'm by no means embarrassed about it or anything like that, I just don't want to continue always sitting in it. Um, and it's not that I don't feel connected. In fact, I still spend so much time in the shelters. I was just at a shelter last month doing, a wellness moment, and ironically enough, in the shelter that I lived in.
Wow.
And so I do feel deeply rooted and connected. I also still do a lot of work with women's organizations and with these shelters. Like we don't just donate money. I'm immersed in these organizations. And so for that reason, I say yes. I still feel so connected. But the no is that I almost see it now through it's like when time passes and you change as a person, I don't feel so connected to Brandi 10 years ago anymore. So that connection has kind of shattered in a lot of ways. And so it's yes and no. And also I was 21 and like we changed so much over time. It's like how connected do you feel to your 21-year-old self
Yeah.
and her experiences and all of these things? And so, yes and no. Um, and for that, it means that Evio has evolved too. And so, for example, something that I found the line through all of it is stress, is that the stress of the experience that I had during that time. Everyone can relate to stress. Everyone has their own experiences. And ultimately, what did stress do to my skin? What did it do to my confidence? What did it do to this whole experience? So for me with EVO, what I did was found that through line of what was true then and what is true now. And also obviously like the science of what stress does to your skin and how it all connects together. So now I lean more into that. Like, what's that through line as opposed to constantly talking about the trauma, which is something I don't want to continue to relate to because
Hmm.
you can't live in the past and in the present at the same time. At least I haven't found a way to do that.
Yeah. And now I think that also shows in your different products that you're launching, right? You just launched these new patches for stress and hydration. And I have to add this little note and caveat. And you posted this online and you said that when you had this idea for this new product, you asked your mentors and they told you not to do it. You did
Mhm.
it anyways. Can you share more about that story and this new product?
Yeah, they felt like the product was like not that innovative and that, it's been done kind of thing. And I was like, no, I feel really strongly about this for a number of different reasons. From a business perspective, having a lead product that's very like photogenic means a lot. And so when someone puts on an eye patch, they take a selfie, and it's a very shareable product. It's a consumable product. So there's a lot of business thought that went into it from a marketing perspective. It's also an easy product to sample. And first and foremost, in the cosmetic space, that's a very crowded space. You need people to try it and fall in love with it. So I was thinking about, what's a lead product that we can sample readily, have a lot of people try it, that's going to be photogenic, that's going to be shareable, that's consumable, so we can also predict as to, how long it's going to take somebody to get through a box. So a lot of those things that I was just like, I feel really confident about this product. And yes, there are so many other eye patches out there, but no one is talking about how stress affects your skin and how, stress affects your sleep. And when you don't get sleep, you have bags under your eyes. All of these different aspects that are just so true to who we are that no one, the truth is the cosmetic world doesn't need another eye patch. It doesn't need another lip gloss. But if you are doing it differently, if you are standing on something different, then it does need you. And so I really saw that to be true for me. And I just went with it. There's been so many times where mentors or even team members at Evio have been like, Brandi, do not do that. And I do it and it flops. So I don't want to be like, and I'm like, oh, I should have listened to them. This time it really worked out for us. It's become our hero product. It's sold in Shoppers Drug Marts across the country.
With your
Uh,
face on the box.
so that was one of the things where my face was not on the box at first, and we were actually asked to change it. And it was actually our COO who said, Brandi, can we put your face on the box? Because the reason why people buy our product is because of you and because of your story and because they relate to it. And I thought it was so tacky and cheesy, and I was like, absolutely not. And she's like, try it for just one run. We'll do one manufacturing run of it. And if we see an increase in sales, then how are you going to say no? And if we don't, we'll go back to the old packaging. So I said, okay, like again, like she's brilliant and she's been in the industry way longer than me. So 9 times out of 10, I listened to her, and we did it and our sales went up by 371%.
Wow.
And so we kept, although every time I see the box, I cringe a little bit, I have to be honest, but it worked.
That's when I took a picture and sent it to you. I was like, hey, I saw your boxes.
Yeah. And we get so much of that as well. Or now when I walk into Shoppers, like the employees at Shoppers immediately are like, oh, like it's Brandi from Evio. We have such a deep connection with the employees at Shoppers Drug Mart. Because a lot of them have their own lived experience and their own stress, and having a brand that embodies that, they are vulnerable and they share with us. And so we know such deep things that we're so honored to that people trust us with simply because of that. So having my face on the box kind of, amplified that as well. But and we do get a lot of photos from people that I haven't seen in years, or just like sending me like a Facebook person or like a friend of an aunt, send a picture of me on the box. So it definitely, did its job from a marketing perspective, all thanks to Bushra. But it is, I'm not really a person to, I am a Leo, and it's not like I'm shying away from it, but it is very awkward to be like, put your face on the box.
Yeah, yeah. Can you share a little bit more about now you're a founder of a huge company? I want to speak to other entrepreneurs out there. How did you get to where you are right now? What are some of those highlights that really stand out to you when you think about your journey of building this company?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, again, I think a theme of life is this and that are both very true at the same time. So for every highlight, I could like counter it with like I probably learned more and actually got further ahead from the mistakes that I've made along the way.
Yeah, I think those are highlights too.
Yeah, the mistake highlight reel is probably like miles longer than the upside. Um, but it was just like 4 years after the shelter that I took on our first investment. And something that I find so interesting is that in the world of entrepreneurship, especially those that have not necessarily like gone through the raising process or anything like that, people think that like raising money is a sign of success. And it's not. It actually really, really changes how your business has to function. And in our case, we took on investment and sold 20% of the company to a publicly traded company. And so that was a huge learning experience. And then ultimately, I ended up having to buy that back from them when things didn't turn out the way that we thought it would. And so that was when I think of the biggest lessons I've had and the biggest like shift was that, going from a place of having such uncertainty and from the shelter to literally, the first $1 million in our bank, not from an investment, $1 million in my bank in 4 years. Um, was a really big, and also in the time in which we were doing it, taking it on from the cannabis space during like the green rush, where all the celebrities were getting into the space and everyone was talking about cannabis. And it also was very uncertain and nobody really knew what was going to happen, but it was, crazy, crazy times. And I think a lot of that went to my head. And I really had to kind of and then it all went away, just as fast as it came. And so that was a huge, huge, huge highlight, I'd say. And also a huge, huge, huge low light in which taught me so much and also had me become extremely close to the people who really stuck through those challenging times with me, um, and forced me to get to know myself better. And yeah, so that was definitely like a really big highlight and low light was the high of not just the money at that time, but how the money was made in that moment of time, which you could never re-replicate. And for anybody who was in the industry at that time, you'd know like these intimate concerts with Snoop Dogg and like these crazy parties at like speaking of Vegas, like the Palms Penthouse in Vegas, a friend throwing a party there and like Jim Belushi had me come speak at his house to like a small intimate group of people about cosmetics and cannabis and this whole crazy whirlwind. And then it goes away just as fast. And it really shifts kind of, I think, what I put value on in life and really shift the way that I looked at how other people put value on things, for sure. So that was definitely a big highlight and low light. Another big highlight definitely is Shoppers Drug Mart. I recognize that we are one of maybe two independently held
Wow.
Canadian founded brands that's distributed in store at Shoppers Drug Mart. And that is a huge accomplishment. And I am so, 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 so grateful to say that they came to us. Um, I don't think that I really thought that we were prepared or in a position to kind of take that on at that time or even, dreaming that big. And so I'm so grateful that others have believed in me before I've believed in myself, including that buyer at Shoppers Drug Mart who sent me a LinkedIn message. Like,
Aw.
how random some of these things have been. And yeah, so that's definitely been another like highlight. And a big highlight of that too has been connecting with the beauty advisors and connecting with like the women and men working on the floor at Shoppers Drug Mart and the intimate stories that they've shared with me about their lives has been a huge highlight. But also at times feels like a bit of a burden. Like going back to the question that you asked of like, do I still feel so connected to it? I do, but holding that from so many people, um, being so vulnerable about my story has created this vulnerability amongst others.
Mm.
And it's a lot to hold, um, especially as someone who is very empathetic to those experiences. It can sometimes be detrimental to my mental health. And so, again, it's a highlight and a low light all at the same time. Like this and that are both very true. And so, through all of that process, I think the biggest highlight to me, at the risk of sounding very cheesy, has actually been who I've become in the process.
Yeah.
Um, and then from a tactical perspective, so if like entrepreneurs are watching being like, okay, that's fluffy and nice, I think that the biggest highlight for me has been where we're at right now, with the right team in place to really scale and to really, I think a lot of my weaknesses are overshadowed by other people's strengths now that are coming in on that. I really feel so strongly about the team that we have in place right now and our ability to really scale on a level that I could have only ever dreamt of. And it took us a long time to get here. It's not like it's been an overnight success by any means. I mean, I'm 10 years in and still have our struggles. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, again, this and that are both very true at the same time. So, um, yeah, I think that that's definitely been. And then of course, like HarperCollins also came with a book deal, which is a huge highlight of my career this far. And again, approached us. And so someone believing in me before I ever believed in myself, I had a huge bias that my last formal education was grade 8, and therefore I have a grade 8 reading level, and I am a slow reader, let alone writing a whole book. So to have someone of the caliber of the editor-in-chief, Jen, who is incredible at HarperCollins, believe in me in that way before I ever believed in myself is another huge, huge, huge highlight, in my career. And also sold my founding story to a production company. Same thing, like for them to approach with this belief in me that is absolutely wild. Yeah, is and so I think, the theme of the highlights of my entrepreneurial career have been people.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the vulnerability and of people's stories and them coming to you, but then you also mentioned not wanting to live in the trauma anymore. Do you find that that conflicts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot. Um, a lot. And it
Mhm.
can be challenging, especially, I mean, business is challenging on its own, even if it's not rooted in a trauma bond amongst your consumers. It's challenging it on its own. So when work is challenging, like, when, we're going through cash flow crunches, we're trying to, make a big new launch, or there was a manufacturing error, tariffs come into place, all of these things, you're already like in a high stress situation. And then add on a layer of like people approaching, wanting to talk to you about some of your most traumatic experiences in life. Like it is a recipe for a mental health breakdown. And I have really had to center my mental health in my entrepreneurial journey, and sometimes become quite frustrated at some of the players in the game, because the reason why they approached us, the reason they wanted to tell my story in a way that, let's be honest, also benefits them, without ever understanding the aspect of what that means for the real lived human experience. And so even sometimes I've had this discussion with our investors in stating, they're like, okay, well, we need you to do XYZ, or have you considered this, this, and this? And I'm like, I know I need to do that for the business, but from a human perspective, it's like wildly unhealthy, um,
Mm.
to have to sit in that duality of it. And sometimes, the human has to come first before the business. And I have to be like, I just am not in the state to do that campaign, even though it's probably going to be a highlight of my career. But it's not sitting right. I can't do it. And so there has been some times where I've had to say no. And from a business perspective, it's been challenging, or even investors be like, you call that person back and you apologize and tell them you'll do it. And I'm like, I can't do it.
Mhm.
So it definitely, yeah, it's been challenging to have that duality of both of them.
Yeah, as you're talking, I have so many business questions come up, and I know we're listening. So many entrepreneurs are listening. You could probably teach an entire course on this. It's just so cool. I mean, to where you've built it, your leadership, and I'm just always so inspired by your story. And now a book. I mean, so tell me more about this book. And I know before we pressed record, you were telling me how much it connects to you, the topics that you're currently writing about. So I want to ask a practical question first.
Mhm.
How is writing going? Like, how do you actually write a book? What does that process look like for you? And then we can get into the topic.
Yeah, so the book took me over 3 years to write. So it's a long, long process. And I will say too, from a tactical perspective, our business suffered during those 3 years while I was
Mm.
writing, suffered. And again, because I was deep in it and I made a decision early on that I don't know if anyone's, and this is probably more like an imposter syndrome thing, is that I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to read this book. Like, who am I to think anyone, like, I have any value to impart with anyone was really the imposter syndrome going through my brain. And so I was like, I don't know if anyone's going to read this book. Um, Although, I mean, HarperCollins is the person behind it. So they know how to distribute a book. Someone's going to read it. But mentally, I was like, I don't know. So I decided that I'm going to allow this experience. If it changes no one else, if this book brings no value to anyone else in their lives, I'm going to allow the experience of writing this book to change me. And that's all I can control. I can't control if this book is going to help anyone else, but what I can control is if I'm going to allow the experience to have an impact on me. And so I really, really, really immersed myself and dove into that. And it meant that everything else around me suffered during that time. And now I have so much respect and really understand writers, and every writer is going to have different processes. It actually really made me think about this. Is like some writers, and a lot of authors actually have come to me and been like, okay, I'm writing a book and this is my writing schedule and I'm going to write in the mornings and this is how I'm going to get, my word count in and all of these things. And I'm like, good luck. Like, I don't know, maybe it's like I'm a type B person, so maybe it's that. But to me, it's an art. And you can't force that out of you. You can't say, okay, I'm gonna sit down and write between 9 a.m. and noon every day, and that's when it's gonna come out of me. And I don't understand how people do that. I also think, okay, this is probably a hot take, but I also don't think that's art. I think that there's a big difference between writing a book and being a writer. I think that there's a big difference between, allowing emotion to move through you and hit the page as opposed to getting words on the page because you promised your editor that there'd be words. So my editors know that I can't keep a deadline to save my life now, unfortunately. And I know that they don't love that about me. But what I can say is that I really allowed this book to change who I was. And because of that, I was kind of miserable to be around, like to my husband for sure, because I was also diving into like really traumatic experiences and trying to rewrite the narratives in my head and on the page. And it really was a whole therapy process. I also didn't have a lot of confidence in my writing ability. So I actually brought on a co-author who this would be, I believe, her ninth book. She's incredible. She wrote Wallflowers. She wrote I Got a Name. She's a celebrated Canadian author. And so I brought her on as my co-author, but really what she became was my writing coach. So we met every Friday. She did a lot of like the research aspect of the book. It's a self-help book. It's not a memoir. So there's a lot of science in there. There's a lot of activities and exercises for people to be able to navigate their own narratives and hopefully have a similar outcome to what I've had in their own right. So she helped keep me accountable to the whole process and teach me how to write. And because of her, I became a great writer, I feel. I mean, the jury's still out because the book's not out yet, but yeah, and now I'm working on my second book, and now she has given me the gift of confidence to know I can do the second book on my own. Yeah.
Cool. And so your book about choices.
Yes.
I know this feels so true to you right now. And really, as you were looking back at the choices that you've made and how choices become our life, what does making choices mean to you after this whole process?
Yeah, I think making choices means to me of like accountability, of recognizing that life is what you make it. Um, and it doesn't mean that hard things aren't going to happen. And it doesn't mean that the bad things that happen to you are your responsibility. That it doesn't mean that, but what you do with it is.
Hmm.
So for me, that's really and your choice to heal. Something that we go through in the book a lot too is different experiences that I've had in my life, acknowledging that other people, make their choices too, and that um, some what unhealed um, experiences can result to and how much they can harm others. And so it's a choice to not go on your own healing journey. And those journeys are going to look different for everybody, but your choices do affect other people, and taking accountability and responsibility for that as well. And doing it with an open mind. So that, like, for example, we haven't seen each other in like 8 years, we just calculated. And I really truly feel like I would need to get to know you completely, even though we have like, fun memories and all of these things that I always cherish. You've made so many choices. And in fact, fun science fact around it is that we make roughly 32,000 choices a day. So in those 8 years, if we did all the math, you've made hundreds, you've made millions of choices in that period of time that have shaped who you are and the world that you live in. And I'm sure it looks drastically different, although some components, like your husband, being the same. Um, and so you really can't hold somebody to whom you thought they were years ago, and continuously having an open mind about who you are and about who the people you thought you knew were. And something actually that was like shattered me in this process of writing the book and really kind of gave me this hunch of what choices really means and the whole narrative piece to it was I actually found the woman who was working in the shelter when I moved into the shelter, and particularly who was working the night that I left the shelter, that I made a choice to leave the shelter and go back home, even though I knew it was not safe. And I found her. She lives in Montreal. So I flew to Montreal and went out for coffee with her to ask her questions. And I realized that her and I had the same facts, the same experience, but a very different perspective of what was happening that night.
Hmm.
And that really shattered me
What
because,
was that? Can you tell me more about that?
yeah, I for 10 years hung on to the fact that this woman was so wise and that she just knew what to say, that she was so deeply trained that, and I thought for sure she had her own experience with domestic violence. So the things that she was telling me the night that I chose to leave was, or that I was about to leave, was rooted in her own lived experience and her own wisdom. And so that night she told me, like, don't leave, just sleep on it. And she convinced me just to stay there for one more night. And that conversation is something that circulates in my head frequently for the past 10 years. Is like, just sleep on it. The truth will still be the truth in the morning. Just sit on it. Just sit on it. And that's something that I held so dear to me that it's something I consider in every choice that I make now. And then when I met with her and had coffee, she was like, Brandi, I was terrified. I just didn't want you to leave because I didn't know what that was going to mean. And I had never seen at that point when she had just started volunteering there, she had never seen another woman her age in the shelter. I was the first person. So I had such a big impact on her because she had never seen it. She didn't have her own lived experience at all. In fact, not at all. She was just trying to get credits for med school. That's why she was there. And she was terrified. And my whole perspective was this wise woman that I hung on to, this narrative in my head for 10 years, this wise woman who I was so numb to life, I didn't even register we were even remotely close to the same age or anything like that. Um, she told me to sleep on it for one night, and I hung on to that as like my North Star. Um, and especially because I did end up going home and things got much, much worse. And I wish that I had listened to her, and listened to her with more of an open mind and more of a truth, as opposed to a place of so much fear myself and a place of loss. Um, and so I hung on to that interaction so deeply. And then when I was asking her about her perspective of that interaction, I, she's like, I knew that you weren't considering like how dangerous it was going to be to go home, and that, you weren't really thinking it through. And I was like, I remember that night so clearly of how scared I was to go home, knowing I was making the wrong decision, but just not feeling empowered enough to make another decision. And like that whole process and her perspective of me was could not be further from the truth. And she had no idea what happened after I left, which
Hmm.
it got much, much worse. I ended up in the hospital. And she never knew of any of that interaction. She thought I went off on life, and um And so it's so interesting to like intertwine the two and acknowledge that her perspective of what she assumed of me, my perspective of what I assumed of her, we're still dealing with the exact same facts, but it is a very different narrative now knowing the truth.
Yeah. And I think that happens with every single situation. I remember a friend calling and apologizing for something that happened like 10 years ago. And she said, "Remember when this happened?" And I kind of remembered, kind of did it. And she's like, "Well, I just, this was my interpretation and my perspective. And I'm so sorry." And I was like, "I don't even remember that." It's totally fine. Right. And so it's
And
so
clearly it ate her
interesting.
up for 10 years because
I
she was still
know.
thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And we hold on to these conversations, these moments, everything. And like you said, some of the facts could be true, could be not, but our story and meaning that we attach to it can really leave an imprint on our being.
And I was even asking her too, like factual questions, because I needed to be like, can I trust my 21-year-old self to have remembered things for what they truly were? So I was asking her questions. She was like, "This is the weirdest coffee I've ever had. This is weird." At first, she definitely was very taken aback. And I was like, "Were there stairs? Was my bedroom the second to the left at the
Wow.
top of the stairs? Was there one bathroom? Were there two bathrooms? What did the shelter look like? How did dinner work? How did the chores work?"
Wow.
I wanted to know if I could trust my 21-year-old memories.
Wow.
Um, and it was so interesting because even the story that I told myself for so many years was there was one bathroom and all 29 of us that lived in the shelter shared this one bathroom. And she was like, "Yeah, there was one bathroom, but there was actually a second bathroom, just we didn't really share it because it was for accessibility use and it was off the kitchen and all of this." So like even thinking about that is like I told myself forever, and even when people ask me about the story, when they asked me about the shelter, I mentioned that like part of the reason why I chose to do this was because those 5 minutes alone in the bathroom that I shared with 29 other women meant so much to me. And then, 10 years later, she's like, "Actually, there was a second bathroom downstairs, just no one used it." And I'm like, there's a lesson in life in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's true. And I see it all the time in the world, right? People are just following and they don't ask any questions. And then I look, when you're going through whatever, an amusement park, and there's 6, 7, 10 different lines and everyone's going through the same four, and you go, "There's two that nobody are going through right now." And I
Mhm.
feel like it happens all the time in every lineup. So I'm always looking for those moments in life. Where are we missing the ease, and where are we missing that line that nobody's in, but we're making life so much more difficult for ourselves, right? That bathroom is such a such an example of that. I feel like, yeah, for me, where's the other washroom? Always looking for the other option. There has to be something that other people aren't asking. And you kind of mentioned this, and I talk about this all the time. I truly believe that asking questions gives you so much power,
Absolutely. And
right?
asking
Questioning
yourself
everything.
those quite
Yeah.
exact. That's what I was just about to say is question everything, especially question your own beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what is your second book about?
Yeah. So it's a very, very, very early process on the
Well,
second
when is
book.
the first one going to be out? Because you said it's not out yet.
Yeah, pre-sales start at the end of this month on May 20th.
Okay. You
Yes.
have to send me
Uh,
the link. That's so fun.
I will. I'm going to send you. We're actually having a fundraiser partnered with Shelter Movers on May 29th.
Cool.
Um, And so we're, again, back to our roots and how important it is for us to continue to raise awareness and raise funds for such an important cause. So Shelter Movers is an organization that helps people leave their home in safety. So, for example, I would have been able to leave with my belongings as opposed to taking on the burden of starting over completely. And so they have an incredible organization that helps survivors and their children get to safety and store all of their belongings and have security and police and everybody in place to be able to do so.
Wow.
So we're hosting this event with them on May 29th. We're super excited. We have 2 tables left if anyone's interested. And that also kicks off pre-sales of the book. And so, but then the book officially comes out in February 2026.
Hmm. We've talked a lot about other versions of you. What is something that you wish 21-year-old Brandy knew?
I wish that she didn't care what other people thought about her
Mhm.
so much. Um, yeah, I really wish that she could let that go.
Mhm. And what is your current Brandy moving through and learning about herself and the world around her?
Um, I think that right now what current Brandy is learning and moving through is that really leaning into my power and potential. I think that I have really struggled with imposter syndrome for years. And again, that's kind of like in this process of writing the book and recognizing like that's a choice, Brandy. Like I don't want to feel that way anymore. What am I going to do to change that? What you're not changing, you're choosing. And so that's really what I'm moving through right now is like taking my power back by changing the things that I no longer want to accept about myself so that I really can like live light and ease and happiness. Uh,
Hmm.
and so I think that for the first time in my life, I'm really shedding the past through the power of choice, as cheesy as that sounds. But like what I don't want, I'm just, letting go without guilt. Yeah.
You say such powerful things so effortlessly, right? What I am not choosing, what I'm not changing, I'm choosing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know. That's not my quote. I've heard it,
Okay, I haven't heard it anywhere. So for me,
but
it's
I
yours.
don't know whose quote that is. I have heard it somewhere. I'm not sure whose quote it is, but yeah, it hit me when I heard it for the first time too, is what you're not changing, you're choosing.
Mhm.
And that couldn't ring more true to me in my life right now, especially after this process of really deep diving into all the choices I've made in my life.
Yeah. What do you hope the listener of this podcast walks away with, and what do you want them to know and hear?
I really hope that they walk away feeling empowered and that whatever it is that they are holding themselves back from, just making the first step in that direction. And yeah, I really hope that they feel empowered to trust themselves to take that first step and then take another and then take another and then take another. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so evident in your story as well. And the first step isn't always perfect, right? It's often messy, but you were so great at taking that next step, whatever it is. Just keep taking your next best step, and before you know it, you're in a completely other place.
Totally. And even when you're in that place, you're dreaming of another place. Like it's it's the journey of life. And
Hmm.
every step is going to be messy. It's accepting that and not being so focused on where you're going or what you're building, but who you're becoming in the process. And as long as you can be proud of who you're becoming, and the choices that you're making today with the knowledge that you have today, then that's just the best you can do. Yeah.
You mentioned that when you're making your next step, you're always dreaming and thinking of your next step. And I think sometimes for entrepreneurs, that is also this double-edged sword because then we're never actually able to be present in the moment. Do you
Totally.
feel like you're able to be present in your business, in your life, and proud of yourself of where you are right now and who you are right now?
No, absolutely not.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, no, you said it so well that like it's a double-edged sword because there'll be little glimpses of it for sure, but it's like also everything's so fast-paced. And even like for example, we worked so hard to for a very tangible example, we worked so hard to have a successful product in Shoppers Drug Mart, which is not a small feat. And we're really excited that we have another big launch coming next month at Shoppers Drug Mart.
Can you tell us what the product is?
I can't, no. Um, but I'm really, really excited for this. It's a new like it's an Evio display uh,
Cool.
with a couple products in it in store. And we worked so hard to get those opportunities. You have to prove your sell-through rate in store, which is really it's one thing to get into the store and then you got a sell-through rate and then you got to, keep up with the Estee Lauders and the, with these big marketing budgets, all these things. And literally we got an email with like, congratulations, we're excited to confirm this new opportunity. And two thoughts happened in my brain at the same time, which did not allow me to be present. One was, this is so last minute. What are you guys talking about? Like, what do you mean you're confirming this for next month? How are we going to pull this off? That's insane. These conversations started back in November and typically take 6 to 8 months. What do you mean 1 month? So you don't even have time to celebrate the thing that you worked so hard for, just got confirmed. And now you're like, how am I even going to make it happen? And so, yeah, I feel like you're just on from one to the next without really having the ability to take a step to celebrate it. Um, Maybe that's just something I need to get better at. Yeah.
I think we all do. The celebration and just enjoying ourselves. I was talking about this with a friend the other day. You always look back on pictures and think, "Wow, I was so beautiful. That was such a wonderful time in my life." And then, but being in that moment, did you think that, right? Probably not. So it's always in hindsight and or in the future. So coming back to this present moment definitely is a practice.
Totally.
Yeah.
And as much as I try to practice it, like I meditate every single day, and there's moments of my day where I'm very present, but I find it hard to be present in the highs and the lows.
hmm Yeah. Thank you for being so vulnerable and for sharing your story, but not just in this podcast, with the world,
Thank you.
because I know that comes with a lot of strength and courage that a lot of people don't share. So thank you for having that and sharing that with us, even at such a young age. Moving forward and doing that at 21 was remarkable. And I love that you continue to lean into that.
I really appreciate that. Thanks,
Yeah.
Vanessa.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today. Until next time, trust yourself, shine your light, and stay true to your heart and mind. Love you.